Hello everyone, and welcome back to our Divine Liturgy course. Today, my friends, we are beginning our discussion of the third part of Divine Liturgy, which begins with the Ektene, or the litany, right after the Gospel, or after the sermon, if there happens to be a sermon after the Gospel. And I'd like to point out to you that we've completed now the whole second part of liturgy, which I have called the entrance into the sacrament of the Word. And that whole part began with the so-called small or little entrance, and it is completed with either the gospel reading or the sermon, if there is a sermon. So now we're beginning the third part, as I said, and I've called this third part the offering up of our gifts. And that means the gifts of bread and wine and of ourselves. This is about self-offering, okay? Now, let me remind you that I said at the beginning of this course that it is helpful to focus at Divine Liturgy not only and not even primarily on the texts of the celebration, but on the central movement or action going on at any given moment of the liturgy. It is these non-textual parts of liturgy that are also more accessible to those incapable of understanding all the texts, like children, or like those of us who do not understand the liturgical language or are not well enough educated in the theology of the celebration. It is easier to focus on the movement, okay? So I've suggested this way of participating better in liturgy, focusing primarily on the major movement. So the movement we're focusing on at this point, my friends, in this third part of the Divine Liturgy, is this offering up, okay? So we are bringing and offering our gifts and ourselves, okay, to God. And we realize that this offering of ourselves ends with God giving us back ourselves transfigured and our gifts transfigured. See, He was the one who gave us all these things in the first place. As our Creator, He has shared His very being with us by bringing us into being, yes? He gives us our very bodies, souls, and minds, as well as the gifts of His creation of the earth, which we then use to make useful things out of, like bread and wine, and we offer these up to Him, together with ourselves, our own hearts, which we now prepare in this third part, which begins with this litany that I've already mentioned, the Ektene, and it will go through to this visible movement that we see of the transfer of the gifts of bread and wine from the prothesis table. Then, by way of the procession called the Great Entrance, the gifts will be transferred to the altar table in the sanctuary. Okay, so we're building up to this moment, and then there will be the transition to the central part of Divine Liturgy, that is the anaphoral prayer. So in this video, I'd just like to review with you the actual structure of this third part of liturgy, okay, so that you know what we're talking about. And then in the following videos, we will go into more detail about these various sub-units of this larger liturgical unit. So let's take a look at the various prayers of this third part of the liturgy, okay? After the gospel or the sermon, if there is also a sermon after the gospel, the holy doors are closed, and we have the deacon, or the priest if there's no deacon, pronounce the Ektene. This is an extra fervent litany, okay, a series of petitions. To each petition, the choir or people respond, Kyrie eleison, or Lord have mercy. And this litany, this Ektene, begins with the words, Ipomen pandes ex olis tis psychis. Let us all say with our whole soul. So, recem psi at sia duszy. Okay. Usually during this litany, there is a silent priestly prayer that the priest prays silently. It's called the prayer of fervent supplication. It begins with the words, Kyrie o theosimon, tin ekteni tafti nikesian, or Lord our God, this fervent supplication, or accept this fervent supplication. Господи Боже наш, прилежное сия моление. Okay, I tell you the beginnings of each prayer because that's how prayers are traditionally named, according to their beginning words, okay? And that's called the incipit. That's just a fun fact. But anyway, this is, if you want to learn better the structure of liturgy, it's good to be aware of how these prayers begin. Next come the petitions for the catechumens, or the litany for the catechumens. The catechumens are those who are preparing for baptism. And there is also a priest prayer for the catechumens at this point. It begins with the words Kyrie o theosimon, o enipsilis katikon, or Lord our God who dwells on high. Господи Боже наш, иже на высоких живи. Okay? Then comes the dismissal of the catechumens. They are told to depart. Okay? And next, we have the priestly prayer. We will have two priestly prayers of the faithful. Not for the faithful, but of the faithful. Okay, because this marks the beginning, after the departure of the catechumens, we are transitioning to the so-called liturgy of the faithful. Okay, we will discuss why this is so, okay, at a later point. So the two priestly prayers of the faithful are as follows. The first priestly prayer, Evharistumen si Kyrie o theosimon, which means in English, we give thanks to you, O Lord, our God of O Lord God of hosts. Okay, Благодарим Тебя, Господи Божий сил. That's number one, first prayer of the faithful. Number two, the second priestly prayer of the faithful, that we have the priest reading, usually silently, while there are several additional brief litanies, okay, occurring at the Divine Liturgy, usually proclaimed by a deacon, if there is a deacon. Okay, the second priestly prayer of the faithful is Palin ke polakis si prospiptomen. Okay, this means, in English, just a second, I have noted for you the English text. Again and countless times we fall down before you. Okay. Next, just bear with me. I know this isn't that interesting, but I want us to be familiar with the structure that we are now going to be discussing. Okay. Finally, we have the Cherubic Hymn and the Great Entrance. Okay. So this section has the singing of the Cherubicon, which begins with the words, let us who mystically represent the cherubim, ita cheruvim mystikos ikonizondes, okay, iже cheruvime taina образующие, okay. So everybody is familiar probably with this famous hymn, and there is a priestly prayer here that is said before the priest will proceed to the prothesis table. He is still at this point in front of the altar table, okay? The holy doors have been opened, and we see that, and he will be reading a prayer silently that begins with the words, Udis axios, nikto je dostoin. Nobody is worthy, and it goes on, who is bound by carnal desires, and so on. So, there is this hymn that will be underlining our unity with the heavenly church and with the angelic powers at this point. Okay, and then there will be a pre-anaphoral section which doesn't properly belong in the anaphora nor in this part of the liturgy, but is a pre-anaphoral part that will include an additional litany and then the exchange of peace, the kiss of peace, yes, in the altar, and what used to be the kiss of peace also among the people. In any event, there's the moment of exchanging peace and making peace with one another, and then there is the creed, okay? And then begins the anaphora. But we're going to be talking about the whole part that leads up to and culminates in the great entrance. So tune into our next video when I will go into detail about the units of the liturgy I just mentioned. In our very next video, we will be discussing the Ektene, the ipomen pandes, the let us say with our whole soul, okay? Exolis tis psychis, racem sia dushi. There are a lot of interesting fun facts that we would like to know about this peculiar, really, placement of such a litany before the dismissal of the catechumens. So stay tuned for that.